My fellow Singaporeans, I know that for many of you, this long May Day weekend is a time of great worry. The coronavirus situation in our country is critical, with over 18,200 cases now being reported and 17 deaths. And we are about to head into the second month of lockdown. Now, this lockdown is absolutely necessary for our public health. But I know for many of you, it has been financially crippling. And I wish things could have been different. And it could have been very different if only the PAP had listened to the people's voice. Because in early February, we told the PAP that it was absolutely vital for people in public to wear the face mask. That it was critical that the government close borders, close schools, order work from home, and ban mass gatherings and enforce extreme social distancing. Now, if only the PAP had done all of the above, we could have had a very short and abrupt disruption to our lives and our economy, and we could have been out of this mess by the end of February. And that was exactly what Macau did. They had the courage to close down their public establishments, including their casinos, which are their economic lifelines, for 15 days. And after the 15 days, they were able to reopen and their economy started to recover. Today, Macau has 45 coronavirus cases with no deaths, and they are linked to mainland China by land. Now, this crisis has exposed how pathetic the PAP leadership really is. Now, let's not downplay the severity of this crisis. I liken it to a war. The enemy is an invisible one, but no less deadly than what a conventional army would face in an enemy. And it is in time of crisis, in times of war, that the great leaders are separated from the mediocre ones. We think of Lincoln, Churchill, Mao Zedong, Margaret Thatcher as prime examples of great wartime leaders and leaders in times of great crisis. We have a government with a cabinet that costs the Singapore people $53 million a year. They say that they are the best and the brightest in society. It's a cabinet full of scholars and generals, and they say they are worth that type of money. And some in their party even claim that they are not paid enough. Yet this crisis has shown how mediocre, how feeble, and how subpar they are compared to the leaderships in other countries. And they had to make that dramatic U-turn on the 3rd of April, when Lee Hsien Loong had to go before the nation and tell people that they will no longer be discouraged to wear masks, which later became a mandatory order to wear the mask, or else you will be fined $300. And to impose the lockdown. And when Lawrence Wong was confronted with the massive explosion of cases in the foreign workers' dormitory, all he could say was that he did not know that the virus could spread so quickly, and that if he had known about it, he would have done things differently. He said he did not have the benefit of hindsight. And in a separate interview with the Straits Times, he said that the task force often had to make consequential decisions based on limited data and information and in a very limited time frame. But my friends, leaders rarely have the luxury of full information and data before them. But what separates the great leaders from the mediocre leaders is the fact that great leaders consistently make the right judgment calls even if they do not have the full panoply of data and information before them. People like Lawrence Wong and others in the cabinet want full information and data before them and to have the luxury of time to analyze them before they make any decisive moves. Leaders rarely have the luxury of time to do that. And that is why, throughout this crisis, we have been plagued by a task force that is always behind the curve, that is always reactive. Why was it that the governments in Vietnam, in Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau had the ability to insist that their people wear the face mask? And our $53 million cabinet was still following rigidly WHO guidelines, which turned out to be very wrong and very harmful. It is because people like Lawrence Wong do not have the courage to accept the consequences of their decisions if they do not have the full information and data before them. And you need courage before you can have great leadership. And Churchill famously said, "Courage is rightly esteemed the first of all human qualities, because it is the quality which guarantees all others." If you do not have leaders with courage, you are always going to get bad decisions and bad judgment calls. Lee Kuan Yew was fond of the phrase, the helicopter view. This ability to see the big picture and to take the right course of action. And this helicopter view has factual and historical basis. There was this man called Clausewitz who wrote one of the great books on war. He is often referred to as the Western counterpart of Sun Tzu, who, as we know, is famous for the art of war. Clausewitz was an officer in the Prussian army, which fought the armies of Napoleon on many occasions in the early 1800s. For 20 years, Clausewitz struggled to pin down Napoleon's military genius. But finally, in his great work on war, he found the secret to Napoleon's genius. And he used a French term to describe it, Coudeil, Coupdeil, which simply means a glance, able to take in a comprehensive view of the whole situation and to take the right course of action. Great leaders like Napoleon, Lincoln, would always be able to make the right judgment calls consistently. Mediocre leaders like Lawrence Wong will always make the wrong judgment calls and claim that they did not have the benefit of hindsight. In this saga, my friends, Lawrence Wong and the task force have repeatedly made the wrong judgment calls. They told us there was no need to wear the mask. They told us there was no need to close schools. There was no need for the government to order work from home. There was no need for social distancing. People could still go out and gather. It was very, very late in the day, 2.5 months in the crisis, when they made that U-turn. So the next time the PAP tell you that they are not paid enough, you tell them to take a 70% cut in their income, as what People's Voice has proposed, because that is how mediocre they have shown themselves to be. We must also make sure that our deserving self-employed, small business owners and micro business owners do not go under because of the financial impact of this disaster. Many families have really run out of cash. Their incomes and their savings have dried up. The $600 which the government gave out is not enough for many to survive a 2 months lockdown, and the period after that, which it will take for the economy to recover. Japan gave each of its adult citizens 300,000 yen to weather the storm. That equates to almost 4,000 Singapore dollars. Surely we can do far better than just $600. We have the means and the ability to take care of our citizens far greater than that. In a crisis of this magnitude, the government must not only be the lender and the insurer of last resort. it must also be the provider of last resort. Only if we are able to take care of the real needs of our citizens can we foster a greater sense of nationhood. There must be a realization that I have a stake in you and you have a stake in me, and that our nation must and shall be considered as a whole and not as an aggregate of disjointed groups. Shortly after the budget of the 18th of February, People's Voice called immediately for the setting up of an emergency fund, from which our self-employed small business owners and micro business owners could draw on to borrow at a cheap rate. We have every confidence that these people will repay their loans with gratitude, and that would be for the benefit of our nation in the long run. We cannot have complicated schemes at this point in time, with many qualifications which prevent people from getting the necessary assistance they need. Schemes must be simple. They must be put out in good faith so that as many as possible can be helped. And People's Voice is also in agreement with the proposal that have been floated by many, that the government allow citizens to withdraw up to $5,000 from their CPF to tide them through this difficult time. This is the people's own money, and they have every right to draw upon it to get themselves and their families through this greatest crisis of our generation. And let this Labour weekend also be a reminder to us of the urgent need for reform in our labour structure. My friends, today we have around 393,000 foreign PMETs working in our country. Now they do jobs which well-qualified and hard-working Singaporeans can do. These well-paying jobs will lead to a better standard of living for Singaporean families. They will enable Singaporean parents to be able to educate their children better, so that in time to come, their children can bring our nation to a higher level of development and progress. But unfortunately, many well-trained and hard-working Singaporeans are not doing these jobs. In the last quarter of 2019, 3/4 of retrenched workers were from the PMET category. It is a criminal waste of talent for any government to allow a well-trained, hard-working Singaporean to be retrenched and not be doing these well-paying jobs. I often liken a government to a father. And it is the father's duty to make sure that his own children, his own sons and daughters are taken care of ahead of any alien children. If a government does not see to it that their own people are taken care of and ensure that their lunches are not stolen, that father is a bad father. On that note, my fellow Singaporeans, I wish all working men and working women of Singapore a very happy May Day weekend on behalf of the People's Voice. And at this time, we give special thanks to our frontline workers who are keeping us safe and sound. Thank you.